This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the guests for coming here today. Commissioner, in 2019, the Liberals promised to plant 2 billion trees by 2031. According to your estimates, will the government plant 2 billion trees through their original program on time? Yes or no?
Given the developments this summer, I would say no. Because it's no longer an incremental trees program. It's becoming partly a tree counting program instead of a tree planting program.
Okay, thank you. If the government somehow plants 2 billion trees, do you believe that the government's emissions reduction targets through this program will be met? Yes or no?
Again, because they're double counting now with another program, the low carbon emissions or low carbon economy fund, the added value of the program has diminished to the extent that right now, of the 100 million or so trees that we just heard about being planted, about half of those, 49%, actually come from another program.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hermans? The Commissioner mentioned the regulatory impact analysis statement for the government's clean fuel regulations. Was the government given this analysis prior to approving the clean fuel regulations? Yes or no?
Yes, that analysis is part of the decision-making process.
So the impact analysis stated that clean fuel regulations would increase the cost of energy and disproportionately impact low and middle income Canadians. Is this correct? Yes or no?
That is correct, yes.
So the government was advised that the clean fuel regulations would increase the cost of fuel and still proceeded with them.
The estimated impacts in the RIAs are for full implementation of the regulations by 2030. There is flexibility within the regs in terms of different pathways, and ultimately the costs, the increasing costs will be determined by choices made by refineries and which pathways, which compliance options they choose to comply with the regulations.
But there was no disputing that they were advised that these fuel regulations would increase the cost of fuel.
The RIAS contains a cost-benefit analysis, which showed that there's a net benefit to the regulations, so that the benefits to society exceed the costs.
Okay. Commissioner, this government tells Canadians that the environment plan is working. They tell Canadians to trust them. They tell Canadians not to worry. Yet, your reports prove something very different. You mentioned that the government's emissions reduction estimates were either overly optimistic or had no rationale. On the emission reductions plan, you state that the government was not transparent in its reporting. On the government's environmental regulations, you stated that the department could not estimate whether any regulation has its intended effect. How can Canadians believe that this government's plan for the environment is working?
So the series of audits, and I'm going to go back from 2021 to now during my tenure as Commissioner, the conclusion is on a net basis on the climate file, Canada's plans have not been working over the past 30 years. We will soon be tabling our initial analysis of the new emissions reduction plan this November, over a year earlier than required under the legislation. We're trying to lead by example by meeting a deadline ahead of time with that report. So we'll have more to say about that, and we're happy to come back in November once we table our first report under the Net Zero Act. But to date, I can tell you, and the graph that is on the cover of our 2021 report shows that Canada's plans to date have not worked in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gas emissions are up from 1990 to now.
Okay, thank you. Back to Mr. Hermans. Did the government conduct a specific analysis on how the clean fuel regulations would impact rural Canadians? Yes or no?
The analysis includes regional breakdowns by different provinces in Canada, but does not have a breakdown of the impacts on urban versus rural.
If so, even the regional, could you table those results?
Yes, for sure. We can provide you with a copy of the RIAS and the cost-benefit analysis contained within it.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So my question is about the Forests and Climate Change Report, which was released on April 20th of this year. Throughout the report, the program is consistently referred to as the 2 Billion Trees Program. So I'll start with an easy question for the department. How many trees is the 2 Billion Trees Program supposed to plant?
The commitment to plant 2 billion trees is a whole of government commitment. The 2 billion tree program will plant the lion's share of those, probably 1.85, 1.9 billion of those 2 billion trees.
Okay, so the 2 Billion Trees Program is not going to plant 2 billion trees. That's no longer the intent of the program?
The intent all along was to include, because it is a whole of government commitment, the intent all along was to include trees that were planted not only under this program, but also under other government programs where the planting was incremental to business as usual and where we could reliably count them. The Low Carbon Economy Fund was always part of the plan. We intend to ensure that a lot of the benefits that we report on, including the GHG estimates, are only based on those trees where we are getting sufficient information to be able to calculate that, which would largely be under the 2 billion tree program.
So why is it called the 2 Billion Tree Program? Why not rename it the 1.5 billion tree program or the 1 billion tree program?
It's a good question. For us, it was trying to be clear about the intent and the whole of government commitment to try to rally interest among Canadians. And we've certainly seen that in the applications that we get from Indigenous governments, from cities, from smaller municipalities, conservation areas, individual Canadians wanting to organize their communities around planting 2 billion trees. We've certainly, it's worked as a rallying point around that commitment and trying to make that commitment happen.
Okay, so on page 6 of the report, it says that only 16.5 million trees were planted in 2022, which is well short of the goal of 60 million trees for that year. But I would like to draw your attention to a CBC article from August 2nd with the following headline: Ottawa announces its 2 billion tree program is surpassing its targets, not well short of what was in the auditor's report from just 3.5 months earlier. So could you explain what was the cause of this miraculous turnaround in just 3.5 months?
So I think there were two things. One was that the audit period ends a few months before the audit report is actually released. So it would have been released prior to our getting a lot of the reporting from the previous planting season or the 2022 planting season. 2023? 2022. So for us, when we are putting all the numbers together in August, we're including planting seasons from 2021 and 2022, as well as the LCEF numbers from 2021, from planting in 2021 that we were able to get reporting on.
Okay, and the LCF numbers, that's the Low Carbon Economy Fund program?
Yes, it is. Sorry about that.
Not the 2 Billion Trees program?
Yes, it is.
The Low Carbon Economy Fund is part of the 2 Billion Trees program?
We had always designed for the Low Carbon Economy Fund to form part of the 2 billion tree commitment and the commitment to plant those trees, because the Low Carbon Economy Fund was going to be ensuring that tree planting by the provinces and territories was incremental to business as usual, and they were going to receive from the provinces and territories sufficient reporting for us to be able to rely on the numbers that they had.
Okay, so in Minister Wilkinson's press release from August 2nd, it says, quote, "The planting of trees through the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund," which is from Infrastructure Canada, "and with the provinces and territories to plant millions of new seedlings under the Low Carbon Economy Fund are captured in this effort." So I guess I would ask Mr. DeMarco, why were trees from these programs not included in your audit of the 2 Billion Trees program?
Thank you for that question, and we're still considering whether to do a follow-up audit because of the vast change in numbers from what our audit team was provided and what was publicly released in the summer. If I can turn your attention to Exhibit 1.3, I think this will help clarify things. So, as you know, in an audit, the department signs off on the factual accuracy of our materials at the draft stage before we provide it. This exhibit showed what they had planted in 2021 and what the estimate was for 2022. They did not say we have the equivalent of what you would call trees receivable or accounts receivable from the Low Carbon Economy Fund in the number of 50 million, which would have doubled the numbers in here. They did not say, oh, we're just waiting for the numbers. Hold on, we'll have this. We were told this is what they were planting, and we were told that the program was about incremental trees, not double counting trees from other programs. We fully recognize, if I can just finish on this, Mr. Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, just a couple.
We fully recognize that the constating documents, the originating documents for the program left it open that they could double count from other programs, but we specifically asked them what they were counting for 21 and 22, and there was no word about these other 54 million trees that they found since then.
Okay,